Hey guys, do you want to know where we're at in the technology adoption curve and where we're at with the use of AI and where we're at in the Gartner Hype Cycle when it comes to AI? Stick around, this is for you. So I talked about this months ago. I just saw an article in Fortune magazine, just read an article in Fortune magazine, and in that article it talked about how the investing community and how executives across the world they're all fed up with AI. They're they reference the Gartner Hype Cycle, which is what we're looking at here. If you're not familiar with it, the Gartner Hype Cycle says that there's a technology trigger, and then there's this huge ramp up to the peak of inflated expectation. And then people realize that it can't do all of the inflated expectations and all of the bells and whistles and pomp and circumstance that everybody thought it might, whether that was scientifically based or not. And then they crash into this trough of disillusionment. Then they have the slope of enlightenment and then the plateau of productivity. And plateau of productivity has also been called the plateau of profitability for a lot of people in this cycle. So the reason why I bring this up is because I talked about this months ago. Actually, funny enough, it was the vernal equinox. It was the spring solstice when I was doing a webinar and a presentation with Perry Marshall. It's on my YouTube channel. You can find it, where I talked about how AI, the article that I just read in Fortune said that we had just passed the peak of inflated expectation. I completely disagree. That was 4 or 5 months ago. And executives are now in the trough of disillusionment. I disagree. That was 4 or 5 months ago, easy, if not even earlier than what I was suggesting. So the reason why this is important is because when we take a look at this image, which is the technology adoption curve, right? You've got the segments here are blue is the innovators. Those are the people who are writing the code. Those are people in academia or in scientists working for engineering firms, et cetera, who are actually elbow deep in making the technology work. In this case, it's the early LLM and AI guys. Then in the red, you've got your early adopters, right? And those early adopters are people like you and I, people who are interested in AI, and that there's that spot in between, and then in the middle of that, that's called the chasm. Wonderful book, early 90s, Crossing the Chasm. If you're not familiar with it, go ahead and look at it. Maybe ask ChatGPT to give you a summary of it or read the book if you're that interested. Basically, what it outlines is that the technology has to live and stick around long enough and find a usefulness in between the early adopters and the early majority in order for it to stick around long term. But here was the epiphany that came to me back in March when I was thinking about this. Each one of these groups, the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards, each one of them go through their own hype cycle. So the idea that the early adopters have it all figured out and they're all right, and no, that's not the case. They're the ones who are just now, I think months ago, just now crashing into the trough of disillusionment. They're saying, hey, wait a minute. Everybody said that AI would be able to make me tacos, but it doesn't make tacos. That has nothing to do with the reality of what AI was actually set up to do. There's plenty of people, but one of the big use cases and one of the big problems in the article was AI hallucinates. Sure, there are instances where AI hallucinate. That's why it says check the information for yourself. If you're copying and pasting and not paying attention, then you're not using AI properly. You're not using best practices, no matter what it is. And you're probably what in the coding world we used to call a script kiddie, meaning you're going to go find some code on the internet, you're going to copy and paste, and if it works in your program, you're thrilled. This is not how you use technology. This is not best practices. This is not long-term. This is the difference between techniques and principles. If you're concentrating on principles in your business, in technology, in using AI, they are not going to change tomorrow, next week, next month. There'll be tweaks, sure. There'll be new advancements in technology, sure. But the principles remain the same. If all you're relying on is a technique where it's the newest hack to get your Facebook ads to work, or it's a tiny little new programming language that does this tiny little thing that helps you jump ahead of your competition for the next 20 minutes, well, you better get ready. That's not going to cross the chasm. You better get ready for disappointment. You're going to spend a lot of time in the trough of disillusionment. So the takeaway here is simple. Concentrate on principles when you go to implement technology. Concentrate on principles when you go to use AI, and they're not going to go out of style. I hope this was helpful. The the Fortune article really caught me on fire. And a big part of it was, hey, I had this epiphany 4 months ago, 5 months ago, 6 months ago. I documented it. You're behind the curve.